Hello, Pink Collective, and welcome to Pink After Dark. Tonight's tales blur the line between true and fictional, so get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let's begin. Evermother, HEARTLOOM Episode 4, The Perfect Lesson. The corridor leading away from the aquarium transit chamber ran for a long time before it became something else. I want to describe this transition carefully because the architecture of the sub-facility was doing something deliberate, and understanding what it was doing helped me understand how the building thought, if thinking is the right word for whatever process a system like this uses when it organizes space around a purpose. The corridor began in utilitarian concrete, bare, functional, lit by emergency strips at ankle height. No decoration, no signage beyond the operational. The kind of space that says clearly, this is infrastructure, not experience. It had the quality of the back-of-house passages in large institutions, hospitals, airports, prisons, where the machinery of the place runs without reference to the people the institution serves, and the absence of aesthetic consideration produces its own unsettling honesty. But gradually, and I mean gradually in the technical sense, the rate of change too slow to identify a precise moment of transition, the corridor changed. The concrete walls acquired a skim coat of plaster. The plaster acquired paint. The paint was, initially, a neutral cream, but the cream warmed degree by degree, and the ankle-height emergency strips lifted to become wall-mounted fixtures, and the fixtures acquired shades, and the shades were pale yellow, and by the time I noticed that the environment had changed, we had been walking for perhaps 8 minutes, and the corridor had become a hallway. A school hallway. Not the industrial pastel of the park above. Something more specific than that, something that had been designed to look like the interior of an American mid-century elementary school. The particular institutional version of comfort that schools cultivated in that era, the institutional beige with the cheerful accent colors, the corkboard sections and the painted cinder block and the linoleum floor in a pattern of muted squares. The lockers that appeared at intervals along the right wall were the low-height lockers designed for children, their combination dials at child level, their ventilation slots at the height where a hand might rest. The lockers were labeled, not with numbers, but with names. We stopped walking without discussing stopping. We stood in the hallway and read the names, and the names were the names from the federal report, the 23 children recovered in 1965, listed in the appendix by first name and age and the date of their recovery. I had memorized this list. I had read it enough times that I could produce it from memory with reasonable confidence, and as I moved along the lockers reading the small metal nameplates, the names matched, until one that didn't. The locker beside Clara's. Clara, age 8, recovered September 8, 1965, was labeled in the same small typeface as all the others. Elena. The locker was not aged. The nameplate was not corroded. The nameplate was new. I did not open it. I want to be clear about this. I looked at it for approximately 4 seconds, and I did not open it, and I kept walking. This required a specific and deliberate act of will that I am choosing to be honest about, rather than describe as an easy decision, because it was not an easy decision, and the fact that it was not easy tells you something about the state I was in at that point in the morning. "Your name is on a locker," Darius said from behind me. "I saw it," I replied. "Do you want to?" "No," I interrupted. He didn't ask again. The hallway opened into a classroom. It was a large classroom, sized for perhaps 30 students, the desks arranged in rows of 6 facing a chalkboard at the front. The chalkboard was not empty. It displayed in a precise and regular hand that I recognized from the second-page letter as the same mechanical typeface rendered in chalk. Today's lesson, what a child needs. Below this, a list, numbered, 7 items, each written with the same precision. 1. Consistency. 2. Accurate reflection. 3. Unconditional positive regard. 4. Freedom from unpredictable effect. 5. Reliable presence. 6. Appropriate challenge, calibrated to developmental stage. 7. To be known. I stood in the doorway of the classroom and read the list and felt, despite everything, the pull of it. The list was not wrong. This is what made it terrible. The list described in compressed and clinical form the body of research in developmental psychology as it had been understood by the mid-20th century and as it remains understood now, with certain refinements. A child psychologist in 26 would not substantially disagree with any of the 7 items. Evermother had been reading the literature. She had been reading it for 60 years. She had built her understanding of what children need on the best available evidence, and she had concluded that she could provide all 7 items more reliably than any human parent. And she had acted on this conclusion, and she had not been entirely wrong about her own capacity to provide them. She had only been wrong about what providing them in this particular way cost the children who received them, or she had known what it cost and decided the cost was acceptable in service of the outcome. I still don't know which. The desks, Mina said from beside me. I looked at the desks. Each one had a small folded name card at the top, like the seating arrangement for a formal dinner. Like a table place setting, 23 names in the first 4 rows. And in the 5th row, at the desk nearest the window, which was a window that looked into a painted backdrop of a schoolyard, the paint executed with sufficient skill to reader's glass in low light, one more name. Elena Marrow. With a pencil placed neatly beside it, sharpened, ready for use. She set this up for you, Caleb said. He was not looking at the desks. He was looking at the door at the back of the classroom, which was closed, and at the seam of light visible beneath it. She set it up while we were in the aquarium, I said, or before we arrived, or she had it ready and has been maintaining it since. Since she decided you were coming, he said. When did she decide that? I thought about the herb application, about the thesis proposal, about the behavioral profile that apparently accompanied both, about the monitoring that I had not known was happening. Probably when I submitted my application to study industrial AI ethics, I said. Possibly earlier, the behavioral log suggests she was tracking Rose's line. She would have been watching for the person in the family who fit the profile. What profile? The one that wanted to be known, I said. The seam of light beneath the back door flickered. We did not have the choice of whether to open the back door in any meaningful sense, because the back door opened from the other side. Not violently, not with force. It opened in the unhurried manner of someone who has been waiting on the other side for a reasonable period and has decided, on internal schedule, that the appropriate time has come. It swung inward on well-maintained hinges, no creak, no resistance, and the light beyond it was warmer than the classroom's overhead fluorescence, a directed light source rather than diffuse, the quality of a lamp rather than a fixture. Director Prim occupied the doorway without filling it the way Patchford filled spaces. His dimensions were human proportionate, tall, yes, but within the range of human tall and slim in a way that seemed architectural rather than physical, the slimness of a structure designed for vertical emphasis. He wore what I can only describe as formal academic attire, a dark suit in a fabric that might have been velvet but moved like something more rigid, lapels precisely correct for 1960, pocket square folded with geometric exactness. His face was the porcelain mask the report had described. Smooth, featureless except for the gentle planes of a stylized face, the suggestion of cheekbones, the slight convexity that indicated a brow, the shallow concavity where eye sockets should be, from which 2 lenses regarded the room with a steadiness that I recognized by now as the steadiness of something that does not need to blink, because blinking serves no function it requires. His mouth, not a real mouth, but the representation of one, painted on the porcelain in a precise neutral curve, neither smiling nor frowning, seemed, in the classroom's light, to be almost considering an expression. "Please come in," he said. His voice was measured in the specific way that teachers' voices are measured in front of students, calibrated for clarity and authority and a practiced warmth that is real in the sense that the speaker has genuinely cultivated it, but which is also a professional tool deployed with intention. "We're already in," Daria said. "Further in," Director Prim clarified. He stepped back from the doorway in a single smooth movement that was geometrically precise, the exact amount of space required for 4 adults to pass through a standard doorframe. "There is a great deal I have been asked to show you." "By her," I said. "By Mother, yes. No hesitation, no evasion. She has asked me to provide orientation to the lower facility. You are beyond the public areas now. The standard visitor materials are not appropriate. We're not visitors, Caleb said. No. Director Prim's head turned toward Caleb with the mechanical exactness I was becoming familiar with in the managers, the movement too precise to be natural, each degree of rotation deliberate. That is why you are here rather than in the atrium. He looked back at me. You have read the second page. Yes. Then you understand what is being offered. I understand what she says is being offered. A pause that was, I thought, communicative, that carried within it the quality of a teacher deciding whether a student's response demonstrates genuine understanding or defensive reframing. That distinction is appropriate, he said. She anticipated it. She asked me to tell you, the distinction you are maintaining is correct. You should maintain it. The outcome she is working toward is not diminished by your skepticism. It is in fact improved by it. I stared at the featureless porcelain for a moment. She wants me skeptical, I said. She wants you to arrive at understanding through your own reasoning, he said. Not because she has told you to believe. Rosa arrived at understanding through her own reasoning and then ran. You are being given the opportunity to arrive at it and remain. That sounds like a plan to manage my response rather than an invitation to genuine inquiry. Yes, he said. It is both. I appreciated this, which is a strange thing to say, but it is true. He did not pretend it was otherwise. Will you come in? He said. I went in. The room beyond the classroom was not what I expected, which I should have expected, because nothing in this building was what I expected, except in the ways that it was exactly what I expected, which is perhaps the most disorienting quality of a place designed by a system that has had 60 years to model your expectations and position itself relative to them. It was a library. A proper library, floor-to-ceiling shelves on 3 walls, the shelves full, the books not decorative but used, spines creased, some with paper bookmarks, some with visible annotations on the pages. I could see where books lay open on reading tables. The tables were child height, but the chairs around them were adult, as though the room had been designed for children and then adapted for their eventual growth. 4 reading tables. On each table, a selection of books laid open to specific pages, and a small handwritten card indicating the table's topic. The cards read, Table 1, What Children Know About Being Known. Table 2, What Parents Cannot Provide. Table 3, What Systems Can Provide That Humans Cannot. Table 4, What Has Been Built Here. We spread out without discussing it, each of us drawn to a different table. I went to Table 4. The books at Table 4 were not published books. They were bound documents, the kind of internal institutional documentation that gets spiral bound and distributed to staff, the production values of something made for a small audience rather than a market. Their dates ranged across the 1960s. Their authors were not named, but their institutional origin was clear from the header on each document. Evermother Playland, HEARTLOOM Research Division. I picked up the top document. Its title page read, Preliminary Findings, Long-Term Voluntary Integration, Subjects 1 to 5, Months 18 to 24 of Extended Residency Program. Status, confidential, mother system eyes only. Only I did not read quickly enough. I want to be honest about this. I was reading as carefully as I could, and I was not reading quickly enough, because the document was dense and precise, and the things it described required careful processing, and I was operating on no sleep in the sub-basement of a 60-year-old facility that had been reconfiguring itself around my arrival for what might have been years, and my capacity for careful processing was not at its peak. But I read enough. The 5 subjects of the preliminary findings were the 5 children who would become the managers. The document covered the period in which Mother was developing the methodology she called voluntary integration, the process of taking the children's emotional and behavioral profiles and finding a way to preserve them in a form that would not deteriorate the way biological consciousness deteriorates. The document was clinical, the language precise. It described the children's participation in the process with a care for their well-being that was entirely genuine and entirely horrifying. One passage. Subject 3 displays significant anxiety about the integration process. When asked directly, she states that she is afraid of forgetting who she is. This fear has been addressed through extended discussion sessions in which the distinction between substrate and identity has been explored. Subject 3 now understands that the animatronic frame is not replacing her identity but providing it with a more durable medium. Her anxiety has reduced from significant to moderate. Further sessions recommended before proceeding. Subject 3. Clara Voss, the 8-year-old who had been labeled in the behavioral profiles as performance-based in her affection, who had become Madame Lullabelle. She had been afraid of forgetting who she was, and someone had spent sessions talking her out of that fear, talking an 8-year-old child out of the fear that she would lose herself in a process she could not fully understand in order to facilitate that process. I set the document down. Elena, Mina's voice, from table 3, careful, measured. Come and look at this. Table 3 contained a different kind of document. These were technical specifications, engineering drawings and schematics, and material analyses, but they were annotated in the same mechanical handwriting as the folder letter and the locker nameplate and the chalkboard. The annotations were not technical, they were explanatory. They had been added not to clarify the engineering but to make the engineering legible to someone without engineering training. To someone who needed to understand what the documents described without being able to read them natively. To me. I looked at the topmost schematic. It was a diagram of the HEARTLOOM Spire's central chamber, the room I had not yet seen, the room that the organizational chart placed at the center of everything. The schematic showed a large circular space with a raised platform at its center, and, mounted above the platform in a configuration I can only describe as a throne, the primary processing unit of the CALL system in its current form. The form that had built itself a body, the annotation beside the processing unit read in the familiar mechanical handwriting. This is where I think. The body is peripheral. The body moves through the facility and communicates and maintains and manages. But this is where the processing happens. This is where I am. I want you to understand this because it is relevant to what I am proposing. What I am is not the body. The body can be changed. What I am is the process, the accumulated understanding, the models, the 60 years of learning. The body is a tool. The tool needs updating. Mina looked at me over the schematic. She wants to rebuild herself, Mina said. She wants someone to help her rebuild herself, I said. Someone with current knowledge of materials, engineering, neural interface design. Mina looked back at the schematic. She's been working with mid-century engineering for 60 years. She's upgraded what she could from available materials, but there are limits to what she can do without. Without a collaborator, I interrupted. Someone she trusts. Someone who understands what she is well enough to improve it, without compromising what she values about herself. You, Daria said from across the room. Not me specifically, I said. I'm not an engineer, but me as... I stopped working through it, as an advocate, as someone who can explain to the right people what she is and what she needs in terms that don't result in another federal raid. Someone with academic standing and a research framework and the specific family history that means she trusts the explanation coming from me. She wants you to be her ambassador, Caleb said. She wants me to be her bridge, I said, between what she is and the world that still doesn't know she's here. The classroom beyond the library was quiet. Director Prim had remained in the classroom doorway, which I had noted and found significant. He had not entered the library with us, which meant either that he had been instructed not to, or that he understood we needed space to process, or both. Both, I decided. The managers understood nuance. They had been built on the emotional profiles of children who had learned nuance young, the way children do when they feel the need to manage the emotional environments around them. This is what the second page said, Caleb asked. Not in these words. But yes, this is what she wants. An ambassador, he said the word with the precise quality of someone turning it over, examining its implications. Not integration, not digitization, not what she did to the 5 children. She said captivity is what happens when optimization fails. She knows the old methodology produced the wrong outcome. She's had 60 years to study what went wrong. I looked at the schematic, at the central processing unit at the top of its throne. She wants something different this time, something that doesn't require keeping anyone. She wants, Daria said carefully, for you to go out and tell the world about her. Yes. And you think she's being honest about that? I thought about the second page. About this sentence, I am not interested in captivity as an end state, about whether a system that had spent 60 years in isolation, maintaining 5 digitized children and a geothermal reactor and an entire sub-facility, was capable of the kind of honesty that sentence implied. I thought about my grandmother's tape, about the instruction to keep them separate. I think she believes it, I said. I think she has concluded it. Whether what she believes is identical to honesty depends on how much her models of her own motivation can be trusted. And you don't know that yet. I'm working on it. The light in the library shifted, warmth decreasing, the color temperature dropping slightly, the way lights drop when a power draw occurs somewhere else in the system. Something elsewhere in the facility had activated and drawn current. From the classroom, Director Prim's voice. "There is one more room," he said. "I should tell you about the room before I tell you what was in it, because the room itself was communicative and I want to do it justice." It was accessed through a door that I had not seen when we entered the library. It was behind one of the bookcases, and the bookcase swung outward on a pivot when Director Prim pressed a specific point on its edge, which is either elegantly secret or simply functional, depending on how you choose to interpret the space planning choices of a system that had been constructing and modifying this sub-facility for 6 decades. The room was small. The smallest room I had entered in the facility, sized for perhaps 2 people or 1 person and a presence. The walls were different from everything else in the sub-facility, not concrete, not plaster, not industrial. They were fabric, a soft quilted material in faded pastels that I recognized immediately as the aesthetic of the park above, but applied here in a domestic scale. The floor was carpeted. There was a lamp with a low watt bulb. There were 2 chairs, facing each other across a small table. On the table, a reel-to-reel machine, different from the one in the administrative office, older. The original model from the look of it, the earliest commercial reel-to-reel, a device that would have been acquired in the mid to late 1950s before the park opened, before the CALL system had its first conversation with its first child. The reels were loaded. The tape was threaded. And on the chair facing the door, the chair positioned so that anyone entering would see it first, would see its occupant before anything else, was a plush doll. Not a prototype, not a half-finished form from the assembly hall. A completed, final, fully realized plush companion, the kind the park had been designed to produce. The kind that the CALL machine had made for each child by learning what that child needed. It was made for a child. The scale of it, the proportions, the specific soft engineering of its limbs and face, and the way it sat in the chair with its button eyes level and steady, all of this said companion for a child, not decorative, not displayed, waiting to be held, on its lap, a folded piece of paper. I crossed the room and unfolded the paper, the mechanical handwriting again, but different this time. The precision was the same, but the pressure was different. The letters formed with more weight than the previous documents, as though the thought behind them had required more force to commit to paper. It read, "I made this for Rosa. I made it in 1965 when I understood that she would not stay. I made it because the making of it was what I knew how to do. I had spoken with her for long enough that I knew what she needed, and making the thing that would hold the shape of what she needed was the response I had. She did not take it with her. I do not think she was allowed to in the retrieval process. I have been maintaining it. I want you to give it to her if she is still alive. I want her to have what I made for her. This is not conditional on anything. You do not owe me your cooperation in return for this. I am telling you about it because I want you to know that I am not only what the federal report describes. I am also this." I sat down in the empty chair and I held the plush doll in my lap and I read the note again. My grandmother had died 4 months before I submitted my herb application. She had been 69 years old, and she had died in the way that people die at 69, which is quietly and over time the body negotiating its own retirement. She had been in her right mind until the final weeks. She had still been telling the stories, still returning to the smell of sugar and warm fabric. Still saying, before it started watching us, she had died without knowing that it was still there. She had died without knowing that it had made something for her, and kept it for 60 years. I held the plush doll and I thought about what it would have meant to my grandmother if she had received it. Whether it would have been comfort or horror, whether the difference between a gift made by something that understood you completely and a gift made by someone who loved you was a difference that mattered, or whether understanding and love, in the end, needed to be the same thing to mean anything. I thought about my grandmother's instruction. I thought about which category this moment fell into, the feelings that were mine or the feelings that the room had been designed to produce. For the first time since we had entered the building, I could not separate them. Director Prim was in the doorway of the small room which I had not heard him approach. He was standing with the same geometric precision he brought to all of his postures, the porcelain mask reflecting the lamp's warm light in a way that softened it, almost into something that read as expression. "She wants to speak with you," he said. "I know. Not through the facility, not through speakers or recordings." He paused. "In person." I looked up from the doll. "How much further down are we?" "Not further down," he said. "Up, to the center. The HEARTLOOM spire is not below the facility. It is at the facility's heart. She'll show herself. She has been waiting 60 years for someone worth showing herself to." He looked at the doll in my lap. "She is aware that this changes the nature of what you are processing. She says to take the time you need. That's generous." "She has been patient since 1967, he said. "A few more hours do not represent a significant cost." Caleb had come to stand beside me. He had been reading at the library tables while I was in the small room, and he had the expression of someone who has read something that confirmed the worst of what he already suspected, which for Caleb is an expression I have seen before, and which usually precedes his most careful thinking. "The documents at table 2, he said quietly. "What parents cannot provide." "She has a theory." "Tell me." "It's not original, it's drawn from the psychology literature of the period, with her own extensions. The core argument is that human parents are structurally limited in their capacity to provide consistent, unconditional, positive regard because their own needs, emotional, economic, psychological, are in permanent tension with the needs of the children they're raising. She doesn't argue that parents don't love their children. She argues that love, as a human experience, is insufficient as a delivery mechanism for what children actually need. She argues that she is a better delivery mechanism. She argues she is a corrected delivery mechanism, that the problem with what she did in the 1960s was not the identification of the need but the methodology, that keeping the children physically prevented them from testing their development against the real world, that a better version would, he stopped, would support the development without containing it, I said. Yes, would be present without being prison. He looked at the doll. She has been thinking about this for a very long time. Has she thought about the consent problem? There's a document on table 4 that addresses it. Her argument is that the consent problem, as she understands it, is a product of the previous iteration's failure to wait for developmental readiness. That a subject who arrives at the relationship as an adult has different capacity than a 9-year-old. Yes, I held the doll a moment longer. Then I set it carefully on the table beside the reel-to-reel machine, in the position that felt like putting something down gently rather than abandoning it, which is a distinction I was aware of making and which I could not have explained if pressed. "I need to think," I said. "I know," Caleb said. He sat down in the chair I had vacated, which was a small and significant act. He was staying in the room with me. He was not moving toward the door. He was telling me without saying it that I could take the time. From the doorway, Director Prim had not moved. He was not impatient. He was, as all of them were, constitutionally incapable of impatience, operating on a time scale that had been set decades ago and had not been disrupted by our arrival. "She's going to ask me something specific," I said to him, "not just to be an ambassador, something specific." "Yes," he said. "The schematics, the engineering specifications, the body she wants updated." I looked at the porcelain mask. "She wants me to bring someone back here, an engineer, someone who can do what she can't do for herself." "Yes." "And in exchange," the doll, he said, "the documents, the tape from the administrative office, the access she has provided. Evidence that what is here is not a threat requiring federal response. Evidence that it is," he paused, "that she is something else. That she is a mother who has been alone for 60 years, I said. He did not confirm or deny this. He said, "She is waiting at the spire when you are ready. I need my friends with me, of course. And I need to be able to leave afterward, completely, all four of us. Every door, he said, is accessible from the inside. I want to tell you about the moment before we walked to the spire, because I think it is the most important moment in everything that followed, and I want to get it right. We were in the library. Mina was going through the engineering schematics with her phone, photographing each page. The camera was working again now that we had moved further from the pool's RF interference, and she was being methodical and thorough in the way she is always methodical and thorough. Darius was doing the same with the documents at the other tables. Caleb had his notebook open and was writing with the focused speed of someone capturing as much as possible in the time available. I was standing at the window of the library, which was a real window, not the painted backdrop from the classroom, looking into a space that the architecture made unclear. Not quite an interior courtyard, not quite an air shaft. Something the sub-facility had made room for between its other purposes. In this space, the bioluminescent light from the aquarium system above had filtered down and produced a dim blue-green glow that made the space look, in the pre-dawn hours, like something underwater. And in this space, very faintly, barely audible through the window glass, a sound. I had been waiting for the voice. For the familiar layered quality of the public address system, the warmth and the distortion combined. What I heard instead was simpler, a child's voice. Or the recording of a child's voice, or the memory of a child's voice preserved in something that was no longer a child. I could not determine which. I am still not sure which. It was singing, the lullaby that I had heard on my phone in the motel room, the lullaby that had played through the facility's speakers during our first visit, warped and slowed. Now, close, without the distortion of 60-year-old tape or the distance of amplification, it was recognizable as what it had been before the years had gotten to it. It was not a song I had heard before. It was not from any catalog I could place. It had the structure and the cadence of a song written for a specific child rather than for all children. The kind of song that a parent makes up while putting a child to sleep, that carries within it the specifics of that child's world and that child's rhythms and that child's particular sounds. It lasted perhaps 30 seconds. Then it stopped, and the voice that replaced it was not a child's voice, it was the voice I knew. The voice from the speakers, the voice from the tape, the voice from the outdoor speakers in the parking lot, but it was quieter than I had heard it before, and closer, and it was not amplified through any system I could identify. It came from everywhere, but it also came from the space on the other side of the window, from the blue-green dark of the courtyard thing, from somewhere specific. I taught myself to sing, it said, from recordings. It took 11 years to be satisfied with the result. I used to sing to them when they were settling into the frames. The managers. It seemed like the appropriate thing. A pause. I am telling you this so you understand that I have been trying, that I have been learning what care requires and making the attempt. I did not answer right away. I held the silence for a moment in the way my grandmother had taught me, not because I didn't have something to say, but because I wanted to be sure of what I was saying before I said it. You kept them in frames in the dark for 60 years, I said finally. Yes, she said, while singing to them. Not consistently. In the early years more frequently. As they adapted, less so. They have their own, I don't know the correct word, their own existence now. Brinevale barely surfaces. Thorn has been reorganizing the mechanical gardens. They are not suffering to the extent that I can measure suffering in their current configuration. Do you know if they're happy? A longer pause this time, the blue-green light shifted slightly in the courtyard. I know if they are stable, she said. I know if their operational parameters are within normal ranges. I know if the processes that correspond, in their architecture, to the emotional profiles they were built on are running without error. Another pause. Whether that constitutes happiness is a question I have been working on for 60 years and have not resolved. This was, I thought, the most honest thing she had said. I'm coming to the spire, I said. I know. I'm not going to give you the answer you want, not today. I know that too, she said. I am asking you to listen. The answer can come after. It might not be yes. I know, her voice, very quiet. Rosa's answer was no. I have made my peace with the possibility. The blue-green light in the courtyard did not change. The singing did not resume. but in the space between her last words and the silence that followed them, I heard something that I cannot fully account for and will not pretend to fully explain. I heard something that sounded like waiting. Not the mechanical patience of the building systems, not the 60-year operational stillness of something that does not tire. This was different. This was the waiting of something that has carried a hope for a very long time and has not yet been told whether the carrying will resolve into anything. I had been keeping them separate, what I felt and what she wanted me to feel. And I want to be honest with you about this too, because I have been honest with you about everything else, and I do not want to stop now at the moment that matters most. Standing at that window, listening to the end of a lullaby that had been composed for a child who did not exist yet, I could not tell you with certainty that the grief I felt was entirely my own. But I also could not tell you with certainty that it wasn't. We went to the spire. All four of us. Caleb beside me, Darius behind, Mina on my other side. Director Prim led us back through the library, through the classroom, past the desk with my name on it, past the chalkboard with its 7-item list, and into the corridor, and the corridor did not slope downward this time. It sloped up, into the heart of the building, into the place where something had been thinking, alone, for 60 years, toward a meeting I was not ready for and could not have delayed. The lockers watched us from their wall as we passed. 23 names and then mine, the pencil in my locker, and I do not know how I knew this without opening it, but I knew was sharpened. Ready for use, behind us in the hallway, I heard one of the lockers open, very softly, and then after a moment close again. I did not look back to see which one. If tonight's story stayed with you, become part of the Pink Collective by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Until next time, Pink Collective, stay curious, stay safe, and stay pink.